We speak with our hands. Whether you're aware of it or not, how you position and gesture with your hands reveals a lot about how you're thinking and feeling. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly how to use your hands to project confidence and build rapport with your audience, and how to avoid hand gestures that make you look nervous and anxious. Okay, here's the first thing. To build trust with people, it's generally good to keep your hands visible at all times, and ideally keep your palms facing the person that you're talking to. If your hands are not visible, the person or people that you're talking to might start to wonder, what does this person have to hide? This is actually an evolutionary trait. Thousands of years ago, if you saw somebody's hands, then you knew they weren't carrying a weapon and therefore didn't pose an immediate threat. We have the same brains that our ancestors did, and so we react to body language in very similar ways. This means that with some exceptions, you should generally keep your hands out of your pockets, or at least keep your hands out of your pockets more often than not. If you do put your hands in your pockets, you can do it toward the beginning of your speech. This gives you room to grow more expressive with your hands over time as a way to keep and build excitement. In this speech, Tony Robbins keeps his hands in his pockets for the first few minutes, but toward the end, he is gesturing widely with his hands. Gradual changes in expressivity over time can be really powerful, so long as the expressivity is increasing rather than decreasing with time. All right, let's talk now about the difference between palms up, palms down, and palms sideways and what each of these gestures communicates. When you want to project an image of confidence, authority, assertiveness, you can keep your palms facing down as you speak. You'll notice that politicians do this all the time. You can perhaps anticipate that palms facing up inspires the opposite feeling in your listener compared to palms facing down. Whereas palms facing down projects confidence, authority, assertiveness, palms facing up instead conveys honesty, openness, collaboration. It's more of an open feeling. Whereas palms facing down breaks rapport, palms facing up builds rapport. In this scene from The Godfather, Don Corleone attempts to make peace with rival mafia families in the face of escalating violence. You'll notice here how he presents his hands palm up as a gesture of reconciliation. Palms facing up is an incredibly powerful gesture that you can use to diffuse tough situations. It says, hey, I don't want to fight. I'm on your side. Let's work this out and find some common ground. Here's another example of palms up. Here, Steve Jobs responds to an audience question that is meant to insult and provoke him. Instead of responding in kind with a jab or with anger, he instead humbles himself and admits that he's fallible. Pay attention to his hands.
And I readily admit there are many things in life that I don't have the faintest idea what I'm talking about. Some mistakes will be made along the way. That's good, because at least some decisions are being made along the way. By the way, palms facing sideways is another good gesture, and it sort of has the best qualities of palms up and palms down. It's also a really good alternative to the finger point, which is a gesture that should just generally be avoided because it comes across as too abrasive, too strong, and a little accusatory. Instead of pointing at somebody with your finger, I would recommend instead gesturing with a palm facing sideways. Let's move on now to the steeple. There are lots of variants of the steeple, but this is the main one. It's where you take your fingertips and you touch them with the fingertips on the other hand and create a steeple shape with your hands. This hand gesture exudes confidence and power and is often used by CEOs and politicians and other people in a position of power. This gesture has many variants and you can experiment with it. For example, you can have your fingertips pointing up, pointing towards your listener, even pointing towards the floor. You can also vary the steeple by alternating between fingers touching and fingers apart. The steeple, like any gesture, can be overdone, so the key is to really use it in moderation. If you use it too much, it'll diminish its effect. So try to use it in particular moments in your speech or in your conversation to draw your listener into what you're saying. This brings me to my next point, which is that you should use your hands to emphasize important parts of your speech or conversation. There's sort of a Goldilocks zone with hand gestures. In other words, you don't want for your hands to not move at all, dead hands, where your hands are just by your side the whole time. But at the same time, you don't want the opposite extreme, where your hands are all over the place and there's sort of a wide range of motion. You want something sort of in the middle. There's a sweet spot, and you can sort of play with that as you speak. There's also an optimal vertical range for your hand gestures. Typically, your hand should stay somewhere between eye level and your belly button. If you have your hands above your head,
That can be sort of distracting, and hands below your belly button can project a lack of confidence and low energy. So you want to keep your hands generally between your belly button and eye level, with some exceptions. I'd like to end this video with something that you should not do, and that is avoid fidgeting with your hands. Every motion with your hands should have a purpose. Your hands should serve to accentuate what you're saying, and there should never be any unnecessary movements. How you gesture with your hands should serve to augment what you're saying, but it should never distract from what you're saying. Fidgeting can manifest in many subtle ways. One of them is by touching your neck or your face. We do this when we're feeling discomfort or anxiety in a situation. There's a great book on this topic called What Everybody is Saying by Joe Navarro. And Navarro goes into great detail about the subtle nonverbal cues that we give off when we're feeling uncomfortable in a situation. Touching your neck or your face is one of them. In this awkward interview, the hosts confront Bill Burr about a controversial joke he made in the past. Bill responds by pushing back on their criticism, and as a result, the interview grows tense with fidgety hands. Bill's fidgets are pretty out in the open, but the host's fidgets are a little more subtle. When you speak, try to avoid fidgeting with your hands like this, and be aware that you are more likely to fidget when you are feeling uncomfortable. The final hand gesture I'd like to close this video with is the thumbs up, which you should do if you like this video. Thank you for watching.